What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Less than 2 days before open free agency starts, or at least legal tampering starts. And there's a lot going on in Seahawks world, and there's plenty to talk about right now. And we've spent a lot of airtime over the last 24 hours talking about the Geno Smith stuff because that was very interesting and very impactful and definitely worth deep analysis. But now we got to pivot a little bit to the possible reaction to the action. And I've talked about this at least a little bit in each of my last few videos, but we need to spend some serious time on this angle. We need to spend a whole video at least on this one because this is accelerating at record pace. This is getting to the point where to deny that this is likely to happen is like trying to deny something like gravity. This seems at this point almost inevitable. This seems like a done deal. In order for this to not happen, a lot of people would have to be just completely wrong. And sometimes people are completely wrong, especially in this line of business. And I'll say this, I hope more than maybe anything that has ever happened to the Seattle Seahawks that they are wrong about this. Sam Darnold. Everybody that does this stuff for a living, pretty much every beat reporter that I know of, pretty much every NFL insider, they're all saying the same thing using slightly different language. Sam Darnold is going to be a Seahawk when free agency opens up in a couple of days here. And I look, this video is more to talk about the technical points of this, but for my purpose I will say I dread this. This is something that is going to make me immediately throw out any of my benefit of the doubt concerning the direction of this team. This is something that is going to make me, at least in my mind, absolutely confirm that John Schneider is panicking. He's not even reacting, he's panicking. He had a plan, the plan blew up, mostly because of his own unwillingness to spend money, and now he's trying to pivot to a new plan that will accomplish the same thing. And that's not good, especially not here. Maybe if it wasn't Sam Darnold, maybe if it was a better quarterback, a quarterback that I actually liked more, a quarterback that I actually viewed as being one of the, I don't know, top 10 quarterbacks in the league, okay, I'd still be hesitant. But for Sam Darnold? So this article's from Florio, and basically he runs down what I just ran down concerning the Seahawks and Sam Darnold. Pretty much everybody is buzzing about this. There is widespread belief that Sam Darnold will be a Seahawk, to the point where Florio even speculates that there is already a deal in place. He speculates this is already a done deal, to the point of calling it tampering. He's that confident about the Seahawks getting Sam Darnold. And it's just one guy speculating that part of it. But we have, I would say, probably at least a dozen guys who are good at this, guys who are insiders, guys who have sources, guys who do this for a living, or in some cases, I guess, gals too. There are some female NFL insiders out there as well. I guess I got to give them a shout out too. They all say this is going to happen. And, you know, number one, that just confirms, in my view, that the Seahawks planned on going for it this year with Geno and DK, and then they couldn't quite get to the contract they wanted with DK, with, well, Geno for sure, maybe DK, and now they're desperately trying to spin the wheel frantically until they land on something else that can give them a similar result in their minds. Now, I certainly don't think you're going to get a similar result from Sam Darnold as you would have from Geno Smith. And I know there's some room for debate here. I know that there will be people who don't agree with me. I know that Sam Darnold, in terms of his raw box score statistics, had a better season than Geno Smith has ever had. I know that his raw just stat line was very good last year. But here's the thing. what did he have in Minnesota and what is he going to have here? In Minnesota, he had Kevin O'Connell, one of the best offensive minds in the entire league, guy who just won Coach of the Year. Brilliant dude. We have Clint Kubiak, who I like, but he hasn't done anything the way Kevin O'Connell has, not even close. Kubiak hasn't even been a head coach yet. Kevin O'Connell has succeeded as a head coach. Minnesota gave him Justin Jefferson, one of the two best receivers in football. He's either number 1 or number 2 with Jamar Chase. We have JSN, who is pushing into the top 10. And for the moment, I guess we have Metcalf. Probably not for much longer, but for the moment, we have Metcalf, who's like barely top 20, right? It's not the same. Minnesota gave him a pretty good offensive line, which he barely took advantage of, by the way. Right now, we have one of the worst offensive lines in football. And we saw what Darnold does when he doesn't have really good protection. So this idea, I don't know what else to call it, simplistic idea that you can just grab Sam Darnold from Minnesota, bring him over to Seattle, and you're going to get the same stuff. Like you're just going to port it from Minnesota to Seattle when we're not giving him anywhere near the same stuff to work with. I mean, think about this. Last year, when the Vikings lost their stud left tackle, Darisaw, for the season, they immediately went out and traded for the Jags guy, Cam Robinson, who is pretty good. Like, so when they thought there was even a little bit of a dent in the armor of what they had built around Sam Darnold, they went out and spent not a huge resource, but a resource on making sure things were solid as possible around him. And what did Darnold do when some of the stuff around him broke down a little bit? Remember the playoff game? Right? Darnold was terrible. And all that happened is that the pass protection broke down. So what makes him different from any other quarterback that can succeed in the perfect context, but cannot succeed in an imperfect context? What makes him different from just any other average quarterback out there? To me, not much. To me, there is a big gulf between Geno Smith, who was actually keeping the Seahawks at a marginal level offensively, like average offensively, with a really bad offensive line, a bad offensive coordinator, and Sam Darnold, who was only able to keep the offense up there because things were humming around him. I mean, you go back and look at Minnesota last year. So much of what Sam Darnold did good, so much of what worked well for the Vikings was off of their deadly play action game, okay? Do we have a play action game like that? Not right now. Maybe we will. But right now we don't. We certainly didn't have it with Ryan Grubb last year. Hopefully it gets better, but we have a long way to go to get to where Minnesota was last year with their play action. And how about the fact they had an elite defense? They had one of the best defenses in the league. We're not there yet. We can't guarantee Sam Darnold that. So what happens when you take a Sam Darnold and you strip away all the things that made life easier for him in 2024? You probably get something not that different than the Sam Darnold you got before 2024, when he was on lesser teams, more flawed teams, teams like the New York Jets, teams like the Carolina Panthers, even a team like the 49ers, where there seemed like there was an opportunity for him to beat out Brock Purdy, and he just didn't do it, right? And I know people think that Brock Purdy's some great quarterback. I think people have cooled off on that a little bit now after what happened at the end of the season last year, but point is, you strip it away, what do you really have? So, to me, swapping out Geno Smith for Sam Darnold is at best, lateral. And I don't actually think it's lateral. I don't even think it's all that close to lateral. I think that there's some ideal scenario where it becomes lateral, but in more than likely, it's a step back. And there are two arguments that I've heard from Seahawks fans that I think at the very least make an attempt to push back on this. Number one, age. Sam Darnold is younger, to which I say I don't care that much. I don't know what this obsession is with getting young players. Like, should we just cut everybody on the team and sign a class of kindergarten kids? Does everybody want young players? I mean, I could do that today. I could cut everybody on the team, sign a bunch of toddlers. Young does not mean good. Not at all. Not even close. Young does not mean things are going to work out great. Oftentimes they don't. Sometimes they do. By the way, Darnold's like 27 right now, by the way. He probably is pretty close to what he is. It's going to be a couple of years before Darnold gets to that veteran point where he just understands everything that he's looking at. Like if you're looking for him to get to the point where he's like Dak Prescott a couple years ago, where he had really just kind of mentally unlocked all parts of the game of football, we're probably still a few years away from that because he hasn't played a ton of football so far in his career. So you have his physical prime, which should be hitting right now, but really he was probably in that last year. I don't think you're going to be looking at Sam Darnold turning into some MVP candidate just because, oh, he's starting to hack the code of the matrix that makes him a good quarterback. But okay, I guess that's subjective. I don't think it's a very good argument. But the other argument people make is that he's going to be a lot cheaper than Geno Smith. We know that Geno Smith wanted $45 million a year. You probably could have talked him down to about 41 or 40. And I would have been cool with that personally. I would have been cool with even I wouldn't have been cool with the 45, but I would have lived with it. And there's this idea, and it is at least a compelling argument, that Sam Darnold is going to want less. Now, I don't know if I buy this personally. For whatever it's worth, Spotrac thinks he's going to get about 40 million. They think he's going to get a little more than 40 million. Now, Spotrac gets things wrong all the time. Maybe you can get Darnold for less. I've heard very optimistic people, and I want to stress, I think they're being very optimistic, thinking they're going to be able to get him for 30 million a year. To which I say, first of all, I don't really buy it. And second of all, so what? I mean, you look at the other quarterbacks you can get. If it's not Sam Darnold, what are you going to get? If you are a team right now that needs a quarterback, sorry if you can hear my dogs. They don't know how to control themselves. If you look at the other quarterbacks on the market right now, who are you going to get if not Sam Darnold? You can get a washed-up quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, or I guess somebody like a Joe Flacco even. You could get somebody like that. You could get a lottery ticket like a Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, somebody who is just completely unproven but has talent. The only kind of even marginally interesting quarterback prospect is, I would say, Justin Fields. Now, I'm not a fan of Justin Fields, but there has been at least a little bit of a track record of success, and he would be very much cheaper, okay, but I think you get what you pay for. So there's going to be some kind of a market for Sam Darnold just because there's no other game in town. What else are you going to do? I mean, Geno Smith's already been traded for. That's not a game you can play. He's going to be locked in with the Raiders for the foreseeable future. So unless you just want to get some random stopgap bridge quarterback like a Mariota or Brissett or somebody like that, Darnold is the only game in town. So I'm not convinced you're going to be able to get him for significantly less than this. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more, but just for the sake of argument, let's say you can get him for like 35 million a year, to which I say, so what? You're saving a few $1,000,000 off of what you could have given Geno Smith in all likelihood. Now let's say it's 30. Okay, at least you're saving a significant amount of money now. Now, I'm going to say this. I think you get what you pay for. I think that there's a significant gap between Geno and Darnold that is probably worth about 15 million a year. But at the end of the day, so what? What's he doing here? We're going to stick Sam Darnold, who holds onto the ball like he's Jeffrey Dahmer? You're going to stick with Sam Darnold behind this offensive line? How is that going to be good for any amount of money? Sam Darnold held onto the ball more than almost any other quarterback in the league last year. Sam Darnold had no concept of how to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Vikings' offensive line was good enough to make it look tolerable. But Seattle will not. So you better be ready to spend every dollar you have and some dollars you don't have on an offensive line to make this work with Sam Darnold. That's what I'm going to go ahead and say right now. That's the only way you have even a chance of making it work. So why am I excited about this when this team has shown a lack of interest and lack of ability of building that offensive line? Like, what are we talking about here? This reminds me of what people said after Russell Wilson was traded. Oh, we traded Russell Wilson. We don't have to pay him a ton of money. Now we can build the offensive line. Did we build the offensive line? No, it was worse than ever. It was as bad as it had ever been under Wilson, and in some ways it was worse. Geno gave us a discount contract that almost no other quarterback was doing at the time, and we still didn't build the offensive line. So now we're just in a Groundhog's Day loop of going, okay, Geno's gone. We don't have to pay Geno. Now we're going to pay Sam Darnold less than we were going to pay Geno in theory, and then we're going to build up the offensive line. Except, why didn't you build the offensive line up 3 years ago or 2 years ago when Geno first got here as the starter? You didn't. Your attempts to do so were kind of pathetic. So I don't see that as some way out here. And the reality is, if the Seahawks really wanted to build up their offensive line, they could have. They could have done it with Wilson. They could have done it with Geno on a bigger contract. They could have. Teams do it all the time. Jalen Hurts is on a $50 million a year contract. They have built one of the best offensive lines in football around him. So it can be done. You're just choosing not to do it, or you're incapable of doing it. So the bottom line is, if Sam Darnold comes here, I believe it will fail because he cannot succeed without having a really good offensive line in front of him. It's not like Geno Smith, where he's at least proven he can play okay and keep the offense at an okay level with a really bad offensive line. Darnold, I think, will melt behind a bad or even maybe average offensive line. So if it's going to fail, why do I really want him for any amount of money? Because guess what? Even if it's $30 million a year, that is still having a negative effect on your cap space for the present and the future. Even that $30 million, it's probably a multi-year deal, right? It's probably a multi-year deal, which means if it doesn't work out and you let him go the next year, there's a bunch of dead money that's going to have to be eaten. There's going to be less ability to roll over cap because of the money you spent on Sam Darnold. And if I don't think it's going to work, and I really, really don't, I firmly believe it's not really going to work that well with Darnold, why would I want to do it for any amount of money? I'm sorry, I don't understand the logic here. Now, if you think it's going to work, obviously that's very different, but I have a very hard time seeing this one work out. To me, the only way I want Darnold is if it's like $20 million a year or less, and there's no way in the world that is ever going to happen. Honestly, and I know maybe I'm on an island here, I'd rather give Geno $45 million a year than give Darnold $30 million a year, because I think there's a significant gulf there. And I don't think this team is going to be able to turn their offensive line from one of the worst to one of the best in one offseason. And that's what it's going to take now. And this video has been way too long, but there's just so much to get into here. And this just sickens me. This hurts me. This wounds me. Because when we traded Geno Smith yesterday, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I thought we had a plan. I thought we were like, okay, it's a little bit of a rebuild time. Not a reboot, but we're going to step back. We're going to try to do this the right way. We're going to focus on building around our really young players, guys like JSN, Cross, Witherspoon, the guys that are really good, the guys that can be part of a core for the next decade. And then we do something like this, which tells me that John Schneider is sitting there and he's terrified of getting fired. So the plan, again, this confirms what I was talking about in my morning video in my mind. John Schneider went into the offseason a couple of days ago thinking, we're going to go for a deep playoff run this year with Geno Smith and with DK Metcalf and with this current group. We are going for it. And then he got sticker shock. Now he's traded Geno. Now he's probably still going to trade Metcalf. I know there's some talk that maybe we don't trade Metcalf now. I'm not really buying it yet, but we'll see. It's possible. But either way, now you're pivoting over to, instead of just doing that step back, you're going to try to force it with Sam Darnold. That tells me you're panicking. That tells me you panicked and traded Geno because you're like, oh my God, I can't spend that money on him. Oh crap, I got to find another quarterback that we might be able to win with this year. Sam Darnold, only game in town. That's the only chance. Him or maybe Justin Fields, if you like Justin Fields, and I don't. I think Justin Fields is bad. But point is, you're not saving that much money. Let me ask you something. If you build all this stuff that we're talking about, you build the great offensive line, you get the great receiver core. Maybe you replace DK Metcalf with another really good player, and things work really well with him and JSN, and Kubiak makes the guys look better than they actually are, and he builds a great offensive system around him, and you build the play action game, and you get a good running game going, and you've got all these things on the Seahawks. Couldn't, like, Sam Howell probably give you almost all of what you're going to get from Darnold? I know Darnold's coming off this great year, and some people are a little starstruck, but I'm sorry. Look at what Sam Darnold did in every year before that. Couldn't Howell do like a Darnold impersonation for $1 million? I feel like he could. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'm out of here. Go Hawks, but this is rough for me, man.